Hi everyone, welcome to your virtual induction lesson for psychology. I'm Mrs. Smith, the head of psychology, and I would like to use today's session to describe the topics that we're going to be studying across the 2 years course, as well as get you involved in a bit of a memory practical, as well as use the last part of the session to discuss some of the summer transition work that will hopefully help you feel a little bit more prepared and ready to start the A-level course. I thought that we could start off with a bit of a warm-up, as our brains need exercising too. This activity is based on the concept that a person uses either more of their left or right hemisphere, which means either side of your brain. People that use the left are said to be more logical and analytical, so they tend to like maths and be really good at it, as well as problem solving. Those, though, that use the right side of the brain more are said to be very creative and intuitive, so possibly those of you that are good at art. Hopefully you'll all join in with me at home. Let's see what the first warm-up involves. You might have seen this task before. It's certainly used quite a lot on TV. What you have to do is say the colour of the word and not the actual word itself. It sounds easier than it actually is. Are you ready? Let's go. Blue, red, red, yellow, green, green, blue, red, blue, green, red, green, yellow, red, green, blue, blue, yellow. How did you do? I'm not sure I got all of them right myself. The final warm-up is a bit more kinesthetic, so involves a bit more movement. You will need to lift either your right, left, or both arms as shown below the letter, while saying the alphabet. For example, when you say A, you'll need to lift up your right arm as there is an R underneath. Hopefully that makes sense. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, go. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. How did it go? Did you find your arms were all over the place? I did at some points. I'm sure you're all eager to see what sort of topics we're going to be studying together. Now on screen you will see that there are 3 papers as indicated by the 3 blue boxes, and we're going to cover all of these together over the 2 years. Now paper 1 is called the Topics in Psychology, and this includes social influence, the idea of conformity and obedience. If you're not quite sure what conformity is, you might have heard someone saying being a sheep before, and so following along with the group, and obedience, how likely you are to follow orders from your parents, teachers, police. We're also going to look at memory. We're going to have a memory practical after the topic overview to see how good your memory is, but we're also going to look at different theories behind how your memory works. We're going to consider why you might forget your homework or where you put your phone, as well as what's abbreviated there as EWT or eyewitness testimony. What happens to people's memories when they witness a crime? Do they get better? Do they get worse? How can police officers and the legal system improve that? We're also going to look at attachment, which will be really helpful for those that want to go into things like childcare or nursing, because it looks at how we form an attachment with our parents and guardians, but also the impact if we don't have an attachment. There are lots of studies out there that say you can become affectionless psychopaths. If you don't form these attachments, you'll find it difficult to form emotions when you're older. And the last section on this paper is probably the one that's most looked forward to, and certainly one of my favourites, psychopathology. So all about mental health illnesses, the symptoms, how they are caused, how we can treat them. We're going to focus on 3 in particular: OCD, phobias and depression, which are actually the 3 most common in the UK. Paper 2 is called Psychology in Context. And this really is the foundation of all of psychology in this paper. The first being approaches. all the different branches and explanations that there are in psychology, because not all psychologists agree that things like mental health disorders, which we've just mentioned, are caused by one thing. Behaviorists will believe that they are caused by your environment. The cognitive approach will believe it is caused by faulty wiring in your brain. The biological, because of your genes. Humanistic is about being the best possible self. And psychodynamic is to do with Freud, who is the father of psychology, a little bit sex obsessed, and has some very unique ideas to explain behavior. Biopsychology goes with the biological approach and looks at all of the different biological systems in our body, not just our brain, that can impact our behaviour, the way we think, our personalities. And finally, on this paper, research methods. So this is how we go about and conduct our research as psychologists. It's going to involve lots of practicals, analysing those practicals. It is that important, as you'll see there, it's doubly weighted. So this is worth the most marks out of all of the topics that you cover across the 2 years. For paper 3, which is called Issues and Options in Psychology, we'll be looking at issues and debates, which are the different arguments in psychology. Nature, nurture, you've probably heard of. We're also going to be looking at things like reductionism, determinism, so new concepts. Relationships, why do you fall in love? What attracts you to someone? We're going to unravel these mysteries. Aggression, again, the explanations behind regression, but this time focusing on things like mob culture, riots, institutionalization, or what we call prison systems more commonly. And finally, stress. I'm sure you're all suffering from lots of stress at the moment, and hopefully we'll be able to look at some techniques to manage that stress based on psychological research. That's a lot of listening to me talk. So how about we get on to our next practical? This time we are going to be focusing on memory, which, as you've just seen, is a topic that we will cover across the 2 years. Now, can you think of any strategies that you use to help improve your memory? For example, what techniques did you use when you were revising for your PPEs and mock exams? Just going to give you a few seconds to have a think about that. I'm sure lots of you use things like cue cards, mind maps, and so on. And many of these fit into the list on the screen now. So things like word-based mnemonics, like acronyms and acrostics. I know I use lots of them in science, like remembering the order of the planets and so on. Mind maps, they fall into the idea of dual processing, which we're going to cover. Chunking, that's the basis of cue cards as well as pegging there. And also something called the method of loci, which I'm guessing not many of you will have heard of, but is a really excellent technique for using lists. And that's what we're going to base our practical on today. For the practical, you're going to need a pen and paper. When you've grabbed one, I would like you to think about and reflect on the question that's on your screen now, which is how good is your memory? I'm going to give you a list of 30 items. How many items do you think you're going to be able to remember? Can you jot down that estimate for me now? My aim is to prove you wrong, to show you that psychology can help to improve your memory and hopefully score higher than you've just estimated. What I'd like you to do is watch the following clip. You will have to click on the image below to get it to work. And when you've viewed it, you'll have to click onto the next slide if it doesn't automatically come up as well. So the clip is about the method of loci. You're going to see what it is and it get put into practice as well. Hopefully, you should have just seen the professor excelling using the method of loci to improve his memory. Now, for those of you who are fans of Sherlock, you might actually remember the method of loci because it is very similar to that of the memory palace that Sherlock uses in the books and the novels. Now, it's a mental strategy to help you remember lists, especially, and different items by imagining yourself in a familiar surrounding, whether that be your house, your bedroom, the walk to school, and placing the items that you need to remember in these familiar locations. Now, the word method of loci might seem a bit odd, but loci is the plural form of the word locus, which means location. So you're placing these lists, these items you need to remember in these locations. So it's a method of locations, is what that word means. Now, in order to recall each item, you have to visualize yourself doing the placing of the object and then going back and walking around your room or your house or that walk to school and seeing that item. Now, the more bizarre the place you put them, the better for triggering your recall of the last item. So our practical is going to involve you having a go. On the next slide, there is going to be a list of 30 words. I'm going to give you 30 minutes to memorise the list using the method of loci. A countdown bar will appear when you have a minute left to give you a bit of a warning. Don't make any notes, just visualize. Sometimes it helps to close your eyes and you're at home in the comfort of your own home, no one's looking. So close your eyes, visualize your familiar location and start popping the next 30 items around that familiar place. Time's up, guys. You now have 2 minutes to remember as many words from the list as possible. Now remember to move around the house, the room, or the walk that you have just envisioned placing these items on. So your 2 minutes start now. You're halfway through your time. You have 1 minute left. Remember, keep on going down those houses and rooms. Ten more seconds. Time up. So, how did you do? In a second, I'm going to show you the list again, and I would like you to give yourself 1 mark for every item that you correctly remembered. Now, it doesn't have to be in order, just give yourself a tick and 1 mark for every correct item that is on the list on your own list. Now, a bit of a heads up, we are actually going to be looking at this list again, but after the summer holidays. This time we are going to see if it helps improve your long-term memory. But for now, let's carry on with the practical. Here's the list. There was wash, apple, jet, mad, actress, marmalade, jack, ban, clock, tile, holdcat, tail, film, pear, bucket, chain, bottle, sand, egg, window, salamander, paper, microphone, cork, piano, dog, captain, tennis, kennel, and tomato. I'll leave the slide up for a few seconds so you can just compare against your own list. How many did you remember? What was your total out of 30? And was that total close to your original estimate? I'm hoping that you actually did better than you estimated and that the method did help you to do better than you thought you could do. This shows us how psychology can help in everyday life, or what psychologists call practical applications. Now let's have a look at your summer homework, which consists of 2 pieces. The first is to research and write definitions for some key psychological terms to create a glossary. The second is to look in more detail at 5 big psychological studies that we'll be looking at when you return. Now, all of this information and the following sheet can be found on the school website. this is what your homework sheet is going to look like. Now you should be able to see the key terms in the purple box next to the jelly bean brain. So things like psychology, counselling, neuropsychology. I'd like for you to use the BPS website, which you'll see above that purple box, and some guidance of where exactly to find these terms. The second is to look in more detail at those studies, which you'll see in the green box. There are 5 studies in total: Pavlov, Bandura, Harlow, Loftus and Palmer, and Zimbardo. There is also a link to Simply Psychology on this document, where you'll be able to find lots of information about these researchers and what they did. Next to each name, you'll also see some tips. For example, next to Pavlov, it's classical conditioning and Pavlov's dog, so you know you're looking at the right study. There is an additional link for Zimbardo as well, as there's not that much about him on Simply Psychology, so you might find more at the prisonexperiment.org. For these studies, that green box, I would like you to make note using the APFCE format, which is something that we use to summarise psychological research quite a lot in the course, and a technique that you can also use when writing out studies in your exams as well. Now, if you look at the box to the right, you'll be able to see what this means in more detail. So A stands for aims. What were the researchers trying to find out? So I've mentioned Pavlov and Zimbardo. What were they actually trying to do? P stands for procedure. How did they go about doing this? What did Zimbardo do? What techniques did he use? And who were his participants? F stands for findings. You know what they were doing. You've told me how they did it. Now what did they find out? What were their results? C is the conclusions. What does this all mean? You know what the findings were. Do they support what the aims were or not? And finally, E stands for evaluation. Now, in all psychological studies, there are strengths and weaknesses. There are pros and there are cons. Have a look and consider some of the positives of the research that you have looked at, as well as the negatives. How could it be improved? Do you do it any better? Unfortunately, that's the end of our session today. But if you do have any questions, then please email me on the email address on screen, which is lsmith@clcc.college. I really hope that you have a lovely summer, and I cannot wait to see you in person really soon. Bye, guys.